All right, hello and welcome to everybody who's tuned in to listen today. I'm Dan Kauder with the DigitalLeft, and today we're interviewing Howie Klein of Blue America. Howie, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I guess we should start off just by a really brief overview. What is Blue America? What do y'all do over there?
So Blue America started in 2005. My PAC and my blog, Down with Tyranny, and two other blogs. One is called Crooks and Liars, and the other is called Digby's Hullabaloo. We run the PAC ourselves. The PAC has only one purpose, which is to raise money for progressive candidates. So we're not affiliated in any way, shape, or form with the Democratic Party. In fact, a lot of the best efforts that we've had have been to challenge conservative and corrupt Democratic incumbents on behalf of progressives. So we, for example, helped Donna Edwards win her race against Al Wynn, a corrupt conservative incumbent, Democrat. We helped, Matt Cartwright, a progressive, beat a very, very conservative Democrat called Tim Holden. So the most difficult thing anyone can do in politics is to challenge a sitting entrenched incumbent of their own party. That's more difficult than anything else. And those people get no love from anyone, no help from anyone. The party just goes wild attacking them. And we try to help those people, and we've been pretty successful at it. Now I think there are some groups that are trying to do that for the first time, but until now there's been no one doing that except for Blue America. And then when we move into the general elections, then we're helping progressive Democrats, not conservative Democrats. So we help progressive Democrats beat Republicans.
Okay.
So those are the two we do.
Okay, now that's a beautiful segue into our next question here. You recently went onto Reddit and did an interview, a bit of a crowdsourced town hall, if you will, called an AMA, which is short for an Ask Me Anything. In it, you responded to a question where someone asked you, who's more important to remove, Nancy Pelosi or Paul Ryan? And you said that Ryan was more important to actively work against, but that Nancy Pelosi ought to retire, going on to say that her congressional expiration date, as you put it, had passed. So when do you think her shelf life expired, so to speak?
She had her glory day right when George Bush was going to war against Iraq. So at that time, she was the number 2 Democrat in the House. She was the whip. The number 1 Democrat was a guy named Gephardt, who is a conservative Democrat. He's not in Congress anymore. He's a filthy, sleazy scumbag. Am I allowed to say scumbag?
Wow, yeah, tell me how you really feel.
Okay. He's a lobbyist.
Okay.
All those filthy scumbag, etc. That all means lobbyist. So he's a lobbyist now.
Okay.
And at the time, he was the leader of the Democrats, and he helped Bush write, well, not that Bush himself wrote it, but he helped the Bush regime write the authorization for the use of military force in Iraq, and then he got all of the conservative Democrats to vote with the Republicans to pass it. So basically all the New Dems, all the Blue Dogs, the conservative Dems in general, what I call the Republican wing of the Democratic Party.
Okay.
So Nancy, who would have been expected to follow her leader, as she always did, she stood up and she said, no, not this time. And she rallied the majority of Democrats. So here we have Gephardt, the leader, Dick Gephardt, the leader of the Democrats, couldn't get the majority of the party to follow him. They followed Nancy instead against the war, and that was the end of Gephardt's career.
I see.
He could no longer maintain himself. His dream had always been to be Speaker. He never got to be Speaker. And then Nancy was elected leader. He left Congress. Nancy was elected leader, and she became Speaker. As a matter of fact, in 2006, the Democrats won back the House. Nancy became the first woman Speaker, and that was a pretty glorious thing. Remember, Nancy Pelosi had come from the Progressive Caucus at the time when it was started by a bunch of people, she being kind of one of them, and Bernie was the first chairman she was part of that. And then when she became the leader, when she got into leadership, she had to leave the Progressive Caucus. That, usually the Blue Dogs, the New Dems, the Progressive Caucus people all leave their caucuses so they can be a unifying figure. The problem there was that she always felt guilty that she was the progressive person, and she surrounded herself with conservatives. So basically, all the other leaders are all, very right of center Democrats like Steny Hoyer. They don't believe in the same things that progressives believe in, and they're generally speaking very corrupt. And when I say very corrupt, I mean they take money from special interest groups and then work to further those special interests. I define that as corrupt and bribery, even though the law, which is written by these Congress people, exempts them. Anyone, just using common sense would say that what Congress people are doing in general is taking bribes, but the law doesn't define it that way, so none of them go to jail.
Right.
Unless they step the bounds, which many of them sometimes do. In any case, Nancy's expiration date, just started chugging along slowly at first, and then eventually she ceased being any good for anybody. She and Hoyer are both old. They have their moments of senility, and it's not like one day when you wake up and you're senile, and the day before you weren't senile. It's a slow thing. She still does some things right, and she still does come from a progressive background. But at this point, in my opinion, she's doing more things that are harmful than are not harmful. So then you could say, so Howie, why did you say that it's more important to defeat Paul Ryan? And there are a couple of reasons, without going into right this minute into how terrible Paul Ryan is. And
right.
There are no words to describe how terrible he is. He's so terrible.
That would take a little bit of time, yeah.
There's no way to replace Nancy with someone even close to as good as she is. That's how bad it is. If she were to just disappear off the earth right now, Steny Hoyer, who's much worse than her in every way possible, would become the leader.
Okay.
If Steny Hoyer, who's a year older than her, and she were both to retire, and she has always said to her inner circle that she won't leave until Steny Hoyer does because she doesn't want to burden the Democratic caucus with him.
Okay, so how do we avoid this horrible line of succession that's stacked up behind her? Do we have to primary everybody that's in a position of power?
Well, good question, because the people who will determine are the members of Congress. They will determine who the next leader is. Pelosi and Hoyer have settled on someone who's really, really awful, named Joe Crowley. He is being primaried right now by a progressive, but it's unlikely that the progressive will be able to beat him or even come close to beating him. And he's really bad. He's very, very bad news. He was the leader of the New Dems. He's a Wall Street guy. He almost got kicked out of Congress for taking bribes from Wall Street and basically bringing freshmen to Wall Street events and meeting them. He got caught at this. He got brought up in front of the Ethics Committee. And Pelosi saved him by literally trading 3 Republicans who had been caught also doing similar things. She said, okay, we'll let the 3 Republicans go if you let Crowley go, which they did. So they traded 3 horrible Republicans for 1 horrible Democrat, and we're now stuck with Crowley as the heir to Nancy Pelosi and Hoyer. So he's the post Pelosi Hoyer leader, and he's really bad news. So how do we stop it? So I've talked to members of Congress about how that can be stopped, and they basically said that it can't be. That, the only alternative to him is worse, and that would be Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Oh boy!
And the way this works in Congress is that the members of Congress who go to the slimy sources of money and take large amounts of money from these really bad sources that no one wants to be too associated with, and then gives that money to the members who don't want to be associated with it, those are the people who rise in leadership.
Okay, so
Hoyer takes money from K Street, and Crowley takes money from Wall Street, and that's how these people build up their power. Any time a Democrat starts looking like they're going to win an election, they will immediately get $5,000 and $10,000 checks from people like Hoyer and Pelosi, who are trying to, I'm sorry, yeah, and Pelosi. I meant to say Hoyer and Wasserman Schultz, but Pelosi too, and Crowley as well. They will get checks from them to try to make inroads into buying their loyalty.
Okay.
And that happens all the time, always, always, always. In fact, I just was talking to a candidate who is going to Washington tomorrow, and I said, whatever you do, don't take a check from any of these people. It'll destroy your reputation.
Okay, so there's been a lot of noise being made on the left. Some people saying that we ought to do everything we can to primary Pelosi. Some say that we ought to do this to send a message. Others, purely for policy reasons. It sort of sounds like then that we ought to kind of back off of her if the people that are lining up behind her are actually that bad. Am I right on that?
The smart thing to do would be to get behind Alexandria Ocasio, who is the woman in the Bronx who's primarying Crowley. That would be the way to do it. I think that the Pelosi thing, first of all, it's not. She used to be my congresswoman. I lived in San Francisco. She's not going to lose. So it's just not going to happen. People there really do like her.
Okay.
And it's going to be really hard to beat Crowley, but if we're going to, as a movement, if we're going to put energy into something, we'd be better off going after Crowley. If we take out Pelosi, what happens? Hoyer or Crowley gets in. They're both worse than her, and I don't mean a little bit worse than her. They're a lot worse than her. I mean, she at least has some progressive bones in her. They don't.
I see. Okay. Well, you certainly seem really passionate about your work as a whole, but are there any races coming up in particular that you're really excited for?
There are many races that I feel really excited about. Many.
Excellent.
Right now I'm extremely excited about. Do you want to talk about primaries, or do you want to talk about general races?
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Let's start with the primaries.
Okay, so for primaries, some of the worst Democrats in Congress are getting primaries. And when I say worst Democrats, I'm talking about, again, the Republican wing of the Democratic Party.
Okay.
So when you look at, if you depending on what metrics you use, there are a few good ones, but generally they all agree that the person with the worst voting record among Democrats is Kirsten Sinema. Kirsten is from the Phoenix area, but it's a solid Democratic district, and she votes with the Republicans against progressive measures more frequently than any other Democrat.
Wow.
So a perfect record, like Pramila Jayapal has a perfect record. Mm-hmm. A perfect record means 100. You have 100, that's a perfect record.
Right.
She's that. The opposite of that would be a zero.
Right.
There is no Democrat with a zero, of course, but Kirsten Sinema is the closest with a 12.
Ooh. Okay.
That's considered to be. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a Democrat go below 20 ever, and she's the first since 2005.
Wow.
She's the first to go there.
All right.
So I know her well. She was on a board that I was on, so I knew her pretty well. And she started out, believe it or not, as an independent socialist. And then she decided socialism was too far to the left, and she became a Green. And then the next time she ran as a progressive Democrat, and slowly, she would change over time. I would expect that she'll eventually become a Republican. That's what she really is. She claims that she's bisexual and she's good on women's issues. A lot of times some of these really bad candidates, whatever the identity politics that are part of their makeup, they're good on that. She's good on gay issues, and she's good on women's issues, and that's it. Everything else she's terrible on. And you have that all whatever, you can name any identity group, and I can tell you someone who's really good from that identity group, and I can tell you someone who's really terrible from that identity group. So, when someone says, yes, we have to elect more women, okay, I agree, we do. There should be a lot more women. There should be about half of Congress. But I wouldn't give up the idea of having good members of Congress just to make the gender thing disappear.
I see.
In like Judy Chu? More women like Jan Schakowsky? Yes. More women like Kirsten Sinema? No, never. Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, so Kirsten is being primaried by a young scientist named Talia Fuentes. So Talia, I don't know a lot about her race. I've talked to her a few times on the phone. She's a little bit mysterious and busy, and I hope she's working on the ground. I don't have the highest of hopes for her, but hey, at least she's doing it, and we're trying to help her raise a little bit of money.
Okay.
Another really awful, and Cinema is a blue dog. Another really terrible blue dog in a solidly blue district is named Dan Lipinski. So Lipinski sort of inherited his seat. His father didn't tell anyone he was going to retire until the day of or a day before the deadline, and suddenly inserted his son as the candidate. So the people in the district basically didn't even know they were voting for the son. They thought they were voting for the guy they'd been voting for decades.
Oh no.
So instead they wound up with this guy basically who was brought in from Tennessee, who's the son of Lipinski, and he's an extremely conservative blue dog. Again, anti-choice and anti-gay, and votes with the Republicans, pretty consistently. He has a very high Trump adhesion score. So, and there's a really good candidate running against him as well, named Marie Newman.
Okay.
And she's a serious candidate, and there's a shot there that she can win. So now, if you want me, I got from the okay that you want me to now move to the general election candidates, which I'm happy to do.
Sure. Which ones are you really looking forward to?
All of our candidates. I don't want to, make it sound like there's one that I like more than any other, but there's a very, very exciting race now that our listeners should be paying attention to if they haven't already, and that is Iron Stash.
Ah, yes, I follow him on Twitter.
Randy Bryce. He is an iron worker, a union activist, and a veterans activist from Paul Ryan's district, the horrible Paul Ryan.
Right.
And he is catching fire. You may have seen him catching fire nationally, but he's also catching fire in the district. Everywhere he goes, people know him now and cheer him. And I've been following this, the attempts to get rid of Paul Ryan for over a decade. I was one of the people who helped to recruit Randy into running, along with the Working Families Party and some of the local labor unions in Wisconsin, and some of the local politicians in Wisconsin. The problem in that district has always been that the Democrats have a policy of not going after Republican leaders. So that's considered to be off the table. You're not allowed to try to take down Paul Ryan, and they have stabbed every Democrat in the back who's tried to do it. So in the past, Rob Zurbahn came close, and the DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, stabbed him in the back. That was a compliment to Nancy Pelosi. And they've done that with every single race with no exception. So there's never been an exception where they haven't tried to screw up anyone who ran against Ryan. So that district is very much a swing district. Obama won it in 2008, lost it in 2012, but close in 2012. In any case, I have called all of the legislators in that district. Like I said, it's a swing district, so there are lots of Democratic assemblymen and state senators and mayors and councilmen, lots of Democratic office holders, and they all say the same thing. They're not going to go out and put their career at risk and put their whole lives on the line, politically speaking, just to be stabbed in the back by the DCCC. So everyone has turned it down, and Randy said he would do it. So he's the guy.
Well, my goodness, I am certainly looking forward to these races, and I do remember Thompson from the primary. It does seem to me like the progressives, their message brings home more votes per dollar spent than it seems like the DNC's big money does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think you mean the DCCC. The DNC
yes, my fault.
basically spends in presidential races, where it's the DCCC that spends in House races, and the DSCC that spends in Senate races, and all three of them are independent of each other. There's not one that reports to another. They're all independent.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing these guys, and I'm looking forward to see what their activist group can help bring home. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up real quick here?
Well, not particularly. I don't have anything especially in mind. I mean, I write all my stuff on at my blog, Down with Tyranny, every day. I do 5 posts a day, and so everything that's in my mind gets flushed out of it as I write.
I certainly know how that feels. I do a daily article on the DigitalLeft myself.
All right.
Yes. Well, all right, sir. Thank you very much for spending some time with us tonight.
My pleasure, Dan. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. You too. Everybody, once again, this has been Howie Klein of Blue America. My name is Dan Kauder with, once again, the DigitalLeft. Thank you all for listening tonight. Have a good week.